Everyone hear me right?
Now I can hear you. I don't know if you're talking before.
Oh, strangely, I can barely hear you, Keith.
I can hear everyone.
Yeah, I can hear you
the whole time.
Okay, I clearly have audio problems on my side, but I'm going to go ahead and try to correct here for a minute. Sorry about this. Okay, I think that should fix it. All right. Well, happy December, everybody. Hope that you had an enjoyable holiday over the Thanksgiving break. This is, I'm guessing, actually, one thing I want to do before we get into the official agenda, the next date on the calendar for a TOC meeting is December 22nd. That feels especially close to holiday season. Do we want to proactively cancel that instance?
I'm not going to be here, so yeah.
Okay. If there are no other objections before the end of the meeting, I will cancel that. That would mean that our next meeting is going to be on January 12th. I took out an action item 2 weeks ago to add our branch cut dates, etc., to the calendar, but I don't remember who I'm supposed to be talking to in order to make that happen. Who's our release manager for 129?
Francisco.
Okay. Then I will touch base with him and get those. I suspect that January 12th is going to be perhaps uncomfortably close to branch cut. It may be that we need to schedule an ad hoc TOC meeting if there's anything that we don't get to today that is necessary for the release. Does that make sense?
Yep, sounds good to me. We'll
Okay.
happy to do that if we need to.
Let's see. And then, John, did you have anything you wanted to share at this point regarding the test infra, or is that kind of still just a background thing?
We could talk about it a bit. It's probably useful to go over it, given we have nothing else. The only other thing I'd bring up is we've solicited Agent Gateway around through all the different meeting tracks. Did we want to finalize on anything here or take that up asynchronously?
Keith, I think you said you were looking for approvals in a little bit of a different fashion than we normally do design approvals. You were looking for a sign off on the markdown doc. Is that right?
Yes. So first step is to try and get agreement on sort of the guidelines for the Agent Gateway feature at a high level, because this is having to do with a different project. And so wanting to get approvals on that markdown doc. And then after we get approvals on sort of those guidelines, we'll go through the process of actually writing a design doc for how. So first is what and why, then the how. And so I have a PR. I just started with Istio because just less thinking at the end of the week last week. But Daniel Grimm pointed out that it might make more sense in Istio enhancements, which probably yes, but also Istio enhancements isn't really used super often. So if anyone's got suggestions on a repo this should go for sort of long-term visibility, longer-term visibility, then I'm open to suggestions. And I'm woke up this morning starting to go through some of the feedback folks have already given, so I appreciate that.
Awesome. Okay, so I've dropped that link in the agenda for anyone who needs a reminder on where to find it. I'm going to try to close out on that this week personally. Keith, did you want to talk about it this morning, or should we? Is there like a reminder enough?
Oops, have to find the mute button. don't know that we need to talk about much. Actually, maybe one thing to talk about that was a common theme that might be good to have some discussion on is metrics and observability between the two. And this is not something that I've looked at deeply for Agent Gateway, but it was a good question. And so Agent Gateway does not purport to be an Envoy replacement, but it makes sense to sort of ask what impact there is to the kind of observability that users will be able to get from the proxy when it comes to what kind of metrics there are on the same dimensions, trace handling, etc. From what I've seen, it's got sort of the big three: metric, traces, and logs. Support for all three of those. Customization is not as extensive as Envoy's is, mainly because it's not it doesn't have as much of a performance impact as Envoy's. But I guess since John, you're here, is there anything that you can say about sort of the observability posture compared between Envoy and Agent Gateway for the sake of the integration?
Yeah, I would say on the logging and tracing, it's as rich or more than Envoy. Not in terms of the number of providers that's supported, which is kind of because Envoy was made so long ago before the consolidation on OpenTelemetry. But you can customize any fields that you want to log or trace using the cell context, which has most of the things that are available in Envoy. We'll continue to expand out some of the smaller things, like I just got a request for TLS version or something like that, which is, you know, for quick 5-minute change to add. On the metric side, we have less metrics than Envoy for sure. Envoy has many metrics. But we have, I believe, all of the core Istio ones equivalents, but not like the exact same syntax. And because right now, for like the Ingress use case, the Istio metrics actually don't really make that much sense, like the whole source and destination stuff. We do that for compatibility on Ingress, but it kind of is meaningless, and you end up with unknown in most of the fields. So
can you clarify that? Source and destination.
So the whole thing with Istio metrics that's unique is that for every attribute, you have both the source and the destination attribute. Like source namespace has no meaning in Agent Gateway, right? Or sorry, it has no meaning in Ingress because you don't know the source namespace.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
And all, you know, source cluster, all these different things. So like Agent Gateway's metrics today don't have like that same source and destination thing. When we go in the future and consider adding like waypoints, maybe we add like just a straight up Istio compatible metric mode where we just emit the Istio metrics directly as is by the waypoint. That's definitely an option as well.
Okay, sounds good. I'll refer to this recording when writing sort of a summary of that posture in the integration doc, just so contributors and users could sort of know what to expect. Other than that, that's all I've got for this topic.
Cool. Thanks, Keith. Appreciate that. All right. John, did you want to spend a little time talking about test infra? Sorry, not only did I put it on the agenda for you, I also put it at the top of the agenda. So like warning, ready, here, go.
No, sounds good. So for those of you that are not familiar, we are doing some migrations on our infrastructure due to budgets and where we're getting credits for clouds. So obviously we're open source, so we take what we get. So today we have every single thing is on GCP, all in, full lock-in for 10 years of accumulation of whatever lock-in we could find. So we're migrating all of that off. Our GCP spend needs to be, let's say, near zero by the start of 2027, so in 13 months. We may get some funding for, like, today we have, like I said, literally everything. So there's a lot of stuff that's high importance, but low cost, like DNS and things like that. It's possible we'll get a bit of funding to keep that, but definitely the bulk of our stuff, which is our CI/CD compute and logging and artifacts, and then our image serving and our blob serving, all of those need to be migrated. So we've been looking into some alternatives. Let me share my screen, maybe. Too many tabs open. Oh, I see the issue. Sorry, my doc somehow got named something that it's not what its name was. That's why it wasn't showing up. Okay. So kind of, I guess, one of our main goals while doing this is now that we're in a different state, we don't want to have migration be painful again when in 6 months or a year or 2 years or however long, eventually funding shifts again and we need to move providers or the provider goes out of business. Who knows what will happen, right? So we want to abstract away all this so that now users are kind of shielded from this. So to that end, what we're going to do or what we're planning is to build kind of these domains that are abstracted from this. So we'll have our two main ones, really, our registry.istio.io, which will serve images, and then blob.istio.io. If you want to bike shed on the subdomain name, feel free to. That serves all of our blobs. The blobs are very easy because, like, generally you can literally just like CNAME redirect. You might be able to CNAME redirect or like just return a normal HTTP redirect to the underlying blob store, or often, depending on which store we use, they can just natively like check a box. They use a custom domain. The registry side is much harder because there's this whole flow of like handshaking and authentication and all this for registries. And so we're building out a small registry redirector. That is something that's been done by a lot of people. Kubernetes has one. Cloudflare's, or not Cloudflare, ChainGuard's built one. There's a bunch of examples. None of them do exactly what we want. So I took the liberty of building one. It's quick. It took me, 30 minutes. It's like 300 lines of code, so not a huge operational burden to maintain, hopefully. That basically lets us have this domain. And under the hood, we can shift where this is going. So, for example, like we have release right now. We could point this to Istio release GCR today, and then at a later point, we could shift it to Docker Hub or GitHub Container Registry or whatever provider is able to host our images. And this can even be like more dynamic, like something Kubernetes is doing is saying, if it's from GCP IPs, then go to GCR. Otherwise, go to S3, or I think they only go to S3 on AWS. But we have that flexibility if in the future we get like more of a split funding where we don't have one single vendor paying for the full funding. So that is some info. Should I keep going, or I've said a lot? But... All right, I will continue. In terms of storing the blobs, this is the easiest one. I think the clear answer here is going to be Cloudflare. We got some credits on Cloudflare. I meant to ask you, Mitch, if we know exactly how much. I think it was kind of a, well, you'll know you spend too much when we tell you spend too much.
I think I do know how much. I'll find that in the email.
Okay. So the reason we use R2 is it's the cheapest and has no egress cost, which is useful. And we have funding, so it kind of ticks all the boxes. This is the least stringent requirement on when really any blob store is good. It's more about the cost. For the registry, I think we're still debating whether we use Docker Hub or GitHub containers. There was some discussion around using R2 as a registry, but it's not officially supported thing, so you have to do some sort of hacks. And given the other two are providing free tier, it seems prudent to try to utilize them while we can. Docker has like rate limits and stuff, but CNCF has a deal with them that they don't rate limit CNCF projects. So in theory, there's like no downside to those. But we'll see. Like, it's possible we use a lot, so it's possible they'll eventually decide we're using too much, and then we'll have to figure it out. But because we have this abstraction, it's fairly easy to move. All we need to do is the actual migration of the data. So because all this stuff is going to be user-facing, my goal is to do this as soon as possible, like maybe this month, and start rolling this out. so that when you install a new release of Istio, you're using this new registry. And we can just point this to GCR, that's fine, like we do today. But the intent would be that we're getting some traction on this. So then when we do the underlying migration, it's kind of transparent to users. That way we don't go and it's like 2027 January, you're out for the holidays and you you wake up, your image is not pulling because there's no funding on the GCR project and the images are dead, right? So we want to do this ASAP. That gives a year of migration, which is probably not enough for some people, but it's kind of the best we can do, and I think that's a reasonable timeline for migration. I think given that this is like the actual registry itself could like have issues, we probably will like put this up. I was thinking putting this up like this week and move our testing over to it. That way we get some dog fooding, and then we can start doing like in the next release the new domain, and then probably like late January, we put out an announcement and kind of say, hey, you can explicitly opt into this for older releases. Here's how you do it. Let people know this is coming up, and then in future releases, we do the cutover. All good so far? All right. One other thing that's cool is we can get analytics from this. Cloudflare has really very easy to get free analytics on what we want, which is basically the polls by version, architecture, image name, etc. So that'll be handy because today it's kind of haphazard. Like we do get some from Docker Hub, but their data is garbage. Like there's so many issues with it. So that will be very handy. So this doc, by the way, it's like definitely in development. There's a lot we have to go through for like every single thing, because we have DNS, secret storage, logs, everything. I'm focusing on this stuff because these are the only ones that are user facing. Like they're not going to care if we change our CI/CD providers, for example. The last part of this that I'm working on right now is kind of the data migration, which we want to start kicking off early, even if it's not necessarily ready, because that way we can use our funding. We have credit center expiring this year, so we can use up our egress dollars this year before they expire. So I'm trying to figure out what stuff we need to migrate, because we have 400 terabytes of stuff in our bucket, but we don't need 400 terabytes of stuff. So I've been trying to categorize everything, and depending on how much Mitch tells me we can spend, it may kind of decide where the cut line is. I'm thinking all the stuff that's legacy, like we left it around. Most of this is legacy, if you can see. Sorry, I copied this from Google Drive or Google Sheets, so the colors are terrible. I need to change it. But like most of this is, all legacy. So we can just not copy that and let it naturally die. There's some stuff that's important, but super tiny, less than a megabyte. No brainer, copy that over. But there's some stuff like our testing artifacts, for example, like all of our logs for the last 10 years of Istio or whatever. Do we need any of that? Open to debate, probably not. We'll have to go look through that bucket, because I'm sure there's like something hidden in there that's actually useful. So I'm trying to kind of analyze what's in there. The real one that's a big question for me is the builds we have. So we have like our actual release builds where it's fairly small, like 2 terabytes total. That's a no-brainer. Like that's what we're going to copy over. That's what's served by those release.blob.istio/release and other things. But we have the per commit builds, which includes both ztunnel, the proxy, and then Istio itself. And that's 115 terabytes, and it's probably not that useful to have all of them. I'm trying to figure out, like, do we want to trim which builds we have, and like what that would look like. Like, for example, like we could keep only proxy builds that ended up in an actual Istio release, for example. Presumably that cuts down quite a bit. Or we could keep only ones that are in the last 2 years of releases or some other things. So if people have opinions on what data is useful, that would be.
I mean, we have a support window, right?
I definitely agree. Like yes, like I agree. I'm just worried about going and saying like, oh, like for whatever reason, I need to go see what Istio 1.20 was doing. and now it's actually impossible to build it because we don't even have the proxy.
You could build the proxy from source, right?
Maybe
Like,
I don't.
We're not losing.
You might be able to. Can you go build it? Can you build 1.20? Sure. Can you build 1.1? I don't know. At some point, there's it's so old that it's probably unbuildable.
Well, it's probably buildable. It probably just takes a large amount of effort to build it.
Sure. Yeah. I don't know. Honestly, probably not, because there's probably pulling dependencies from other things that have stopped serving. But
Do we need the interstitials or just the release ones? Right, because the release artifacts would go back to every actual release and patch.
yeah, so there's a few. So part of the reason why we have so much data is a lot of stuff ends up copying. Like the full flow of the process is like a PR goes to Istio proxy, we build it, right? Now, maybe that build, or maybe it does not go into Istio. Sometimes we only get every 5th one, for example, right? And then there's going to be a per commit build. That per commit build has the Docker images stored in an OCI registry, and the Docker images exported to a blob store. And those Docker images obviously contain the proxy binary, among other things. Now, it doesn't contain all the proxy artifacts, because the proxy build has like debug builds and normal builds and TSAN builds and whatever. It just contains the production one, so technically it's not full copying. And then that build may get promoted to a release, which means it goes into the pre-release bucket in Blob Store. And then that may get promoted to a real release, which means it gets promoted up to the real release one. So in the end, you have it copied in like 7 places.
So, well, let me ask a test question. John, seeing as you end up debugging a lot of shit for people, when was the last time you had to go and take a 12 release old version of Envoy to test some?
I've never done it. I have a fear of deleting things, though. So like but there's very easy arguments to be made that are very convincing that there's no need for any of this stuff. So one of the other things, I guess, as well, in terms of the data migration tools, Cloudflare has 2 offerings. Obviously, we can copy and paste between things ourselves. These are just their kind of managed offerings. One is called Super Slurper, which is a bulk tool, which you can basically do either a full bucket or a folder within a bucket, or you can list up to like 10,000 individual files, and it will just go and do the migration for you. I don't know how fast it is, but presumably it's nice and keeps track of like the state and deduping and making sure, all that sort of thing. And then they all have this thing called SIPI, which is basically you don't copy any data, but if they request the data, it does like a copy on write, or I guess copy on read. And so that way we could say like, hey, for this year, you're not gonna have any of these, like, if you request the proxy builds, we'll keep them around, but after that, they're gone. I think it might give us some analytics as well, so we can see what's being requested, so we can get a kind of more concrete idea of like, is anyone actually using this stuff, or is it totally dead? So that's also an option we have.
Does GCS not give us any of this either? Like, can we see it sort of preemptively if any of these things are used?
You could probably string together like 8 different GCS servers. I think I've looked into this, and I think it was 8 different services to end up getting like logs on which files are accessed. But it's also probably going to be like noisy, because it'll be 99% of the time it's all going to be like, oh, release. But we don't care about the common files, right?
Yeah.
So possibly yes, but it might be challenging. And yeah, well, the thing I've noticed with Cloudflare is everything is so much easier than GCP, and I thought GCP was so much easier than other clouds. So I've been very happy with my 1 week of Cloudflare user experience.
Could we soft deprecate them, John? Like, take the Istio Prow and I guess Istio build stuff and make it semi-inaccessible by obfuscation, and then wait to see if people complain. Similar to copy and read, but a little bit more draconian to actually get the feedback.
How would we hide it?
Rename it. Move the folder.
spin up a whole separate bucket for ease of migration, and then we're tracking how much data is in the new bucket more definitively.
Like a retired namespace bucket or something, a folder or something like that.
Yeah.
Seems reasonable, I think.
Well, I guess another question, like we're talking a lot about what do we do with like the tail end of like 5-year-old builds, but what do we want the cutoff to be? Because clearly we want the recent builds, right? We talking like, and we ideally we don't end up in a state we're on Cloudflare in 6 years or whatever. We have a similar spreadsheet and we're like, all this crap we accumulated, right? Like for sure on the testing, that's going to be the easiest, but we have to figure out where we're running our tests for it to make sense to talk about. But clearly there, I think like we'll want a much more aggressive, like there's no need to have permanent retention of testing logs. That's kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah.
You know, that could easily be like a month retention, but builds, you know, probably want it a year, 2 years.
I was going to say the only the biggest vendor LTS I know of for Istio is 2 years. Not that necessarily impacts us, but just as a data point. If we exclude Canonical, because they're doing like a 12-year LTS thing. So like 2 to 3 years seems pretty safe as far as the maximum that anybody might possibly need. Beyond that, it feels like diminishing returns. That being said, I did see somebody report an issue using Istio 1.18. So every now and then I see reports that would have made me question my assumptions. But 2 years seems reasonable.
Yeah, it's also like we're talking about the intermediate artifacts. Like we're not removing any releases ever.
Gotcha.
So for why I'm saying that, Keith, by the way, our actual releases are less than 3 terabytes total. So I don't see any reason to delete those personally.
Yeah. You're talking about the intermediate like build stuff. Gotcha.
Yeah, the only thing though is so for most of the builds, okay, so in terms of the builds, we have 35 terabytes of proxy builds, and a large portion of that, this is the sole source of that build of the proxy. For all the other stuff, everything else is replicated in other places if it becomes part of a release, right?
I see. So the proxy stuff is the source of truth for everything else. Got it.
Yeah, I'm talking about like the debug builds and the ASON and TSON builds and stuff. Like that's just the only thing that is not replicated anywhere. But we could also see, like, I don't know how much we'd filter out if we went and said, like, look, don't have every proxy commit, just have the ones that are ended up in an Istio release. And then that can only possibly be our many releases. We had like 200 and each one's maybe 5 gigabytes. So it's like 1 terabyte maybe. That cuts us down to quite a bit.
5 gigabytes being all the different permutations of the proxy build, right?
Yeah, that was also an estimated number. I don't actually know the full size of all the builds, but probably roughly that.
Yeah, I can't think of a time where a non-release or a proxy binary that does not correspond to a release would be useful. Because and I think what you would do in the case where you need something like that is you just go to the latest release or the closest release. And if something happened in between there, you just have to try to build or upgrade. Yeah, that feels.
Yeah, I mean, you should be able to build reasonably easily up to N-4, right?
Yeah, you should. I mean, we have vendors doing it, so.
Yeah. And so, like, what is the expectation of somebody who's like, I've got a problem in 118? We're not going to fix it.
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, the only case I can see where the historical stuff is going to be super valuable is going to be like flake detection. If we wanted to revive the flake dashboard, I know we've had some flakiness, but even then, like a year worth of data feels like a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. So like 2 years of retention at the upper limit, like we're N-2. Even if we pretended to be N-4, that's still just over a year.
Right.
You know, if we wanted
So
to give ourselves buffer to be 2 years or more Kubernetes-like.
Yeah. Okay. I think we're arriving at a shared understanding, which I'll try and write up and codify in order to actually kick off the migration of the data sometime in the next few weeks. I'm curious how long it takes for them to copy like 10 terabytes or whatever. I have no idea if that's an hour or 10 days. I'll let you guys know.
Wait, here's a question. Should we just start deleting stuff in Istio Pro and Istio Build?
I don't know. It's a good question. What I don't know what happens is once our credits go away and we have all this crap still there that's costing like, you know, 20K a month or whatever, I don't know what happens to it.
I would be surprised if it's anything but like a lack of access. Like I'd be very surprised if it would actually
Well, or Bill.
coverable.
Well, yeah, like, you know, there's no way to say like, don't exceed my budget on GCP, right? And so
I think there is now, but
okay, maybe there is now. We should actually look because in my mind, I was just like, we'll just leave all of our garbage there and they'll delete it. And it is what it is. But now that I think about it, that's probably not something we can do. So yeah, maybe we should start cleaning things up.
Why can't we? Because they're going to try.
Because I'm pretty sure they're going to send CNCF a bill and CNCF's going to be like, well, we're not paying for this. And then they're going to be like mad that things are going on. And then eventually, sure, they'll probably like mark our account as like irreputable or whatever. And they'll also take down anything we hope to keep there, like our DNS names and whatever. It just seems
I see
like
what you're
it's probably
saying. Yeah,
that
that's fair.
Now,
Yeah,
that being said, the other thing I wanted to bring up is like maybe we do a hard cut from GCP entirely and move our DNS and other things as well. But we can get to that topic. So I'm starting to agree, Louis. We probably should just delete some stuff. Also, make us spend a bit less, which is nice. The only reason why we haven't deleted anything is because I don't know if you remember this or not, but a while ago we tried to delete some stuff and we accidentally deleted the wrong things, and we had to go to a big postmortem with the GCS team where they shamed us for deleting things we weren't supposed to and said we would never do it again.
And well, now they're telling us we have to, so that's a little different.
Yeah, well, they were fine with us deleting it. They were not fine with us store it from the backups they had. Keith.
One last thing is I think there might be another topic on the agenda, but have we thought about maybe things that we're using that don't have replacements or that are GCP specific? So I think I added a comment. I think there's like a database that we use for bots for our labels or things like that. Or
I thought about it. I think we totally kill everything related to that, unfortunately.
Gotcha.
But Mitch, I think you were more involved in that, so curious your thoughts. I think you had posted some comments that sounded like you were thinking the same, but we hadn't actually discussed it. I was thinking the bots, we just move off to, like, there's the GitHub bot ecosystem has evolved since now. I don't know what it looks like, but I'm sure they have something that we can use.
Almost everything we did with bots, like there's better off-the-shelf solutions for today. Most of those did not exist in 2017. So
yeah, the one thing we do that's like not off-the-shelf bots thing is we were storing all the data that then you could use for like analytics, but we don't actually use that because now we use DevStats for everything.
Yeah.
And so that's
Istio's died a while ago, I think.
Yeah, so I think we just let that die.
DevStats or Keith, which one are you talking about?
So Inge.istio, I think, is what the domain name was.
Oh,
with all
yeah,
the different stuff, analytics and things like that.
Yeah, so I think we just let that die. There might be some other stuff. Let me see. There's Secret Store, but that will just be tied to our CI probably, wherever we're doing CI.
GPG keys and stuff for our packages. maybe.
I think
Not
we sign.
good.
I don't think we store a key. I think we sign it with the GCP service account identity.
Okay. Okay.
So that's going to require some work.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's definitely a lot of work to be done. I just don't know that there's. Yeah.
Then I guess another thing, John, where can we help? Obviously, I mean, we don't expect you to do the entire migration yourself. You've done a great job sort of spreading all this out. Where would you like people to jump in and help? Or do you need more time to sort of look at the path, sort of, what's
I
sort of that?
think the upfront stuff is that we want to do like right now is the short stuff that's it like I just need you guys to like sanity check it and approve and whatnot. The harder stuff will be the CI migration. That I haven't really even started thinking about the fine grained details, and that's where we'll need a lot of help and multiple people.
Okay.
But for this, it's ultimately just going to be like pushing up my redirector, and then hitting the button to migrate a bunch of data and figuring out what criteria we want to put in the migration. But I don't think it will take much time.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Yeah. Other thing we use, by the way, RBE for Bazel cache. So like that will be bundled in with whatever our new CI is, I suppose. But if we lose that, I think our proxy times will shoot from like whatever they are now to like 4 hours or something. So
Isn't RBE dying? I think I saw that somewhere.
it's been dying for like ever. I don't know what the state of it is, but at the very least, we use it for caching, not for execution, and it's been useful for that. So
Gotcha. Okay.
that being said, I think you can just cache directly on like a blob store, so it might be pretty easy to migrate off.
Yes, there is support for. That's got built-in support for S3 and GCS. It doesn't have it for Azure, and I don't think they have it for OCI. But we could build we've got
a lot of them have
who are building stuff that like a front end for it, so it's doable with not a ton of effort.
Azure doesn't have a S3 compatible API.
There's some nuance with auth, I think.
Okay. Well, we can figure it out.
Yeah,
sure.
We've got people who's doing it internally already with like a shim that they've built on top of it. So I'm sure I know it's possible.
Yeah. Okay. Looking at our spend, by the way, I found finally our spend thing. There's nothing that stands out to me as obvious that we're forgetting. So hopefully there's not anything. There is one like Cloud Run. Actually, we do like our Slack hosting on that. It cost us. It rounds down to $0. So as long as we keep the account there, then we can just keep that there probably.
Nice. Thanks for taking us through this, John.
Yeah, no problem. I guess stepping back is we are trading off a heavy GCP dependency with largely a heavy Cloudflare dependency. Does anyone have concerns with this approach and think we should do anything differently? Or I don't know if I mentioned, but this whole registry redirector thing runs on Cloudflare workers.
So we're taking out some Cloudflare dependencies. As I understand it, we're also looking at taking out like GitHub Actions dependencies to replace Prow so that we have a little bit more, I guess, fungible compute. We can sort of dynamically shift which cloud provider provides worker nodes without re-architecting our test infrastructure. Am I getting that approximately right?
Kind of. Like the tricky thing with the infrastructure is that you need like the identity stuff. So it's not just like we just need a machine that can run anywhere and like I could throw it on like my laptop as a compute node and everything would be fine or whatever. But in general, yes.
And that's effectively for signing binaries.
Yeah, for info pushing to anything, like most of the pre-submit stuff doesn't require permissions, but most of the post-submit stuff does because we push up. Well, actually, you still need permissions even for baseline to write logs, but it's kind of a lower permission, right? It's just like write access to the Prowl log bucket.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Sorry, Keith.
Wait, I thought we weren't switching to GitHub Actions anymore with the Oracle Cloud stuff.
Oh yeah, sorry, I glossed out over that. Yeah, Mitch, I don't know if you saw the latest. It's not I don't think it's yet decided if we're going to move to GitHub Actions or not.
Okay.
But it's definitely an option. Like that'll be our, once we get past like the initial images and blob store stuff, I think CI will be our next thing we need to tackle. The nice thing about that is technically we don't have to get anything running until January 1st, but obviously we should get it before then. So, just so we have a buffer, but there's no real incentive to do it early. Whereas for this stuff, the sooner the better because it's actually user impacting. So
right. Yeah, I guess my overall thought, I don't really care about GitHub Actions per se, just as long as we're kind of following the principle of trying to maximize our flexibility moving forward. For instance, having the redirector, I think is great. The
good thing about the redirector is that it is technically, the redirector itself obviously has to run somewhere and it runs on Cloudflare. But if Cloudflare were to not be viable, we could move it to somewhere else and we just change where the domain's pointing. I had gone kind of back and forth many times that serving an OCI registry is way harder than it should be. It surprised me. And I had thought at one point, I need to update this, but like Cloudflare has a very specific pricing model for their workers that is not seen on any other platform, which is that they only bill you for the CPU time and they don't bill you for any networking stuff. So what that means is that if you have, so like there's two approaches to doing this, right? One is you act as a proxy and you fetch the data from the actual underlying registry, and then you serve that back through the worker. Or the other one is you serve a redirect. Now, if you're just going off straight up OCI spec, it's not possible to serve a redirect for the blobs generically because of this authentication stuff that I could get into, but it's complicated. And so you would have to proxy it through. And the nice thing about Cloudflare is that how they charge is that the proxying, you're using like basically no CPU time. You're only using network time, and the network time is free. So it's basically the only one where it's economically viable to run such a workload. But the nice thing is that the way that GCR, Docker Hub, and GitHub Container Registry all happen to work, make it so that it is possible to do a redirect because they themselves use redirect under the hood. So given that, like we would be portable, but in theory, it's possible that we had a container registry where we couldn't do a redirect and we had to proxy it, and then the only economically viable approach is Cloudflare for that. So all that to say is that there's a very small possibility of lock into Cloudflare with like a terrible combination of things to happen, but I don't think it's a big concern.
Yeah, that seems reasonable.
Plus, the nice thing is like the GCP lock-in was problematic because we spent a lot. Cloudflare lock-in is probably less problematic because the spend should be quite low, like order of about $25 a month or something. I don't know what the price will be, maybe $5. And so the issue would really be that like something happens to Cloudflare itself, which is probably not the biggest concern. Well, it's a big concern if it happens, but it's a much bigger concern to everyone else in the ecosystem that will be exploding. If that happens, will be the least of their worries.
Makes sense. Is it all right if I move us on to the multi-cluster beta? All right. Thanks, John. I appreciate all of your work on the test infrastructure. So just to set some context, Istio's ambient technically it's not it is multi-cluster, but we're calling it multi-network specifically. Support went alpha in August in the 127 release. We had originally hoped to get it to beta in 128, but we found some pretty significant changes that we needed to make in order to make it more viable. And so we've been busy doing that. I think most of those merged in 128. We got some positive feedback from the NetApp team, I think 2 weeks ago, on their usage of multi-cluster and multi-network and kind of what's gone well, what's gone poorly. So I just wanted to check in. Our intent is to merge this or promote this feature to beta in the 129 release. This is the burn down list that we've been tracking in terms of what needed to happen. Most items are marked as complete. Obviously, there's bugs are always a real-time question. It's not complete exactly, but they're getting serviced in a timely manner. The only thing that I think was a blocker that needed like work from TOC level, as long as there's no objections to the other things, is the service scope API needed a formal review before we can move it up to beta. So before I jump into the API, does anybody have any broader questions about multi-cluster and multi-network? All right, so I'll move us over to the API here. The service scope config API is part of the way that Ambient decides which services are going to be visible across clusters and which are not. One of the consistent points of feedback that we got around sidecar-oriented multi-cluster is that just forcibly making everything a multi-cluster service caused some trouble for some of our users. Some solutions to that include like violating namespace sameness, which is something that we're really not willing to do as a project. So service scope config was a compromise where by default, users have to opt in to mark their service as global before it will be accessible from other clusters. The scope config purpose is to allow users to customize that. So while the default service scope config says you need to label, I want to say istio.io/global equals true, service scope config will allow the user to customize that label selector so that they can say, I need to, rather than opt in, I want to opt out of global services, or maybe they already have some device that they're using to label which services are meant to be global and which are not through something like MCS. They can just adopt that label selector here in the service scope config, and that will allow them to not have to relabel things in order to onboard onto Ambient multi-network. So with the promotion of multi-network to beta, we would like to promote effectively this API to beta. I don't think it'll formally become beta because it's part of mesh config, which is alpha. It's not a required API in order to make Ambient multi-network work, in the sense that it's already set by default. When you simply install Ambient multi-network, we take care of setting your service scope config for you. It's simply a matter of providing customizability for those users that need it. Do we have questions or concerns?
I think one thing I'll add about service scope that we're talking about changing in this next release is, well, right now we read the local services service scope, and we are
And you
based on
apply
some
that to other clusters services, right?
Yes, thank you. We don't read remote mesh config currently, and so we'd only we're applying the local clusters config to remote clusters, assuming they're the same. With some recent changes to read remote trust domains, we are looking to also read remote service scope so that we are letting the remote cluster be the authority of what how to consider a remote service, whether it's local or global. So this, I think right now in the documentation it says the local will apply. We'll change that to say the remote will apply, which I think is the more expected behavior. So want to add that tidbit.
Do we have any user feedback?
On service scope config in particular?
Yeah.
Not that I know of. I don't know of any users aside from Keith and I and our team that have been interacting with the service scope config API.
I did hear Jackie wouldn't know, she's out today, but I did hear some feedback. I believe at KubeCon, Jackie and Steven's talk, that was positive about the service scope API, and they liked the way that they were able to, user liked the way they're able to sort of set what that contract is going to be for exposing their services. I'll see if I can't dig up, I think it was at KubeCon, but I'll need to.
It was. I remember that too. I remember the conversation with Jackie. I just forgot exactly who it was that said it.
Yeah.
Well, and I think like there was a decent amount. I've seen a decent amount of feedback on the idea. I've not seen, Louis, in response to your question, I've not seen particular like I've used this and here's what I think, but rather very strong positive feedback on the idea that it's not, you're not forcing the user to make all of their services global as soon as they onboard to a multi-network Ambient. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I have positive feedback on the idea. Uh, oh, yeah, I'm just wondering about the value of promoting, right? Obviously, the API is not changing. The API is there, right? Generally, we like to have a little bit of concrete user feedback before going to beta. If we've had it, great. We could just jot it down somewhere.
I wonder,
we
does it make
haven't-
sense to promote ambient multi-network without promoting service scope?
I mean, there's obviously the default setting, right, which works.
Yes.
If nobody needs any more than the default, then you're not under pressure to promote to beta. That's all.
Yeah.
I don't have a super strong opinion, but just as general practice, it would be nice.
Okay, I'm going to leave that as a comment in the API section over here. Let's see.
I don't think there's any downside to leaving it as alpha.
Yeah.
Probably. Like, I guess there's the odd customers like we can't use anything that's labeled alpha. But
Yeah, there will be some internal Microsoft challenges since we intend to use the API and Microsoft gets hesitant about things with the alpha label on them. But that's our problem. Don't worry about it.
Go whip some user feedback then, I guess. Is the,
Exactly. Yeah.
the feedback.
We'll take care of that on our side. Well, and the TLDR is when you develop an API that is mostly for yourself. Don't expect to be able to get to beta real quickly. That's a very reasonable pushback.
Is there anything else?
That was the only thing that I saw on this document that stood out as remaining. Obviously, as more bugs are raised, we need to continue addressing them. So that's sort of a continual thing, but we have integration test coverage, we have documentation, we have samples, we've explained performance implications. So I mentioned that our next meeting is, I think, January, did we say 12th? If you're comfortable with the beta launch, if you can throw your approval here for 129. My goal is just not to have any surprises at that TOC meeting in a month, given that there will be very little time before branch cut to make changes at that point. So take a look. If you have any concerns, please raise them and we will get to them as quickly as possible.
Thank you.
And I think that's the end of the agenda and the top of the hour.
Magic.
Well, it was good seeing everyone. Hope you enjoy your break from TOC meetings with the skipped meeting, and I'll get the calendar adjusted for that. And we'll see you all in the new year.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays. Thanks.